The Baltimore Ravens head coaching search is one of the hottest topics in the NFL, and there were some interesting details reported about the interviews Baltimore is conducting right now.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher, Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And now, the #1 sports podcast network. Thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage here for you on the show. And thanks to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners, if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We have a lot to talk about today. New reports dropped on the Ravens head coaching search with the key detail, as well as we'll talk about some Stephen A. Smith. He spoke on Lamar Jackson and his input on the head coaching search, as well as what's next for this team. And actually, we're going to have a pre-segment to the show. Cordell Woodland on 105.7 The Fan. He'll be on the show today. But if you didn't know, there was some news that dropped late at night on Wednesday night / Thursday morning. First, today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you and presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. You use code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. We have a great show in store with Cordell. We're going to be talking with him throughout the entire show, but wanted to first react to the news because it's Ravens related. John Harbaugh late at night on Wednesday evening, or I guess Wednesday night / Thursday morning. Adam Schefter and multiple reports have revealed John Harbaugh's likely next destination. So maybe you're waking up with us and you haven't heard the news, or maybe I'm breaking it to you. Maybe, but we have reports from Adam Schefter that John Harbaugh, barring any setbacks, will be the next head coach of the New York Giants. They're working to finalize an agreement. Deal's not final yet. Contract numbers are still being negotiated, but still, this looks like it's going to happen. And I'm happy for John Harbaugh. You know, I think this works out for all parties. I think it works out for the Ravens, it works out for the Giants, and it works out for John Harbaugh. I think all three sides, for being honest, are winners. He gets to work with Jackson Dart, Cam Scatteraboo, Malik Neighbors, some really nice defensive pieces, although I'm going to hope that the Ravens trade for Brian Burns. Maybe John Harbaugh gives the Ravens a nice little parting gift in Brian Burns. And I actually, a perfect John Harbaugh offseason. Offensive coordinator Greg Roman, defensive coordinator Zach Orr, got biggest offense edition Daniel Falele, biggest defense edition Brandon Stevens, and there you have it. No, I'm kidding, of course. I have a lot of respect for John Harbaugh, and obviously he's one of the most decorated coaches in this league, and felt like the Giants, it was going to be them all the way. There were some rumors about the Titans and the Falcons, but John Harbaugh officially going to the Giants. Well, I guess not officially yet, but it's likely John Harbaugh will be going to the Giants according to these reports. So we'll see how many former Ravens coaches and possibly Ravens players follow him to New York. I'd assume a decent amount based off of history and kind of how these things work. But big news. John Harbaugh's next destination, that domino officially, again, I keep saying officially, almost officially falls here for the Ravens. But let's now dive into our conversation with Cordell Woodland, talking all things Ravens and that head coaching search, which, again, some key details being revealed about what they're looking for and what they're doing with the interview process. John Harbaugh let go and fired after 18 seasons, and there was a lot of speculation about whether it would actually happen or not, Cordell. And to me, I was saying that, look, it's time, but I'm not sure they're actually going to do it. Did you have any sense did you believe that they were going to do it? Did you think it was time? And, what's your overall take on Baltimore deciding to move on from John Harbaugh?
Yeah, I mean, I like you. I thought it was time. It had gone as far as it could go, and it was to the point to where it was going backwards at an alarming pace now. When you miss the playoffs and you just got unexplainable things happening that are costing you football games. That was part of what Steve Bisciotti talked about on Tuesday. But despite all of that, there still had to be an element of surprise of they finally did it. I mean, we're talking about them moving on from a coach that has coached this team for the last 18 years. That's not something easy to do. It's easy to just fall into a pattern and just feel like this is what it's going to be. And credit to Steve Bisciotti and all the reasons he gave for moving on from John were pinpoint. he felt like it went stale. He talked about, if not now, then when. They go from hosting an AFC championship game to losing in the divisional round to not even making the playoffs as a whole. You've got guys that aren't developing in the way that they should. Something's got to change, and it's going to, more times than not, the coach is going to go before the player. It's not many organizations that's going to choose the player over the coach, especially when the franchise player in Lamar's case is still in his prime right now. So I have no issues with it. And from everything Steve said, John didn't have any issues with it. And that's one thing that I kept saying. John had been coaching on borrowed time for a while, honestly. Like nobody can look at this situation and say the Ravens didn't give John Harbaugh every opportunity possible. It probably went on a year or two too long, if we're being honest. Him getting fired over the phone, it is what it is. I don't feel as crazy about it as others do. Although, it is a little bit of a surprise. They've had this strong relationship. By all accounts, they still have a good relationship. So for it to be done over the phone, yeah, you don't love that aspect. But from everything from Steve, it seemed as respectful, I guess, as it possibly could be. But I just think it was time, man. And for both sides, John will bounce back pretty quickly, as it looks like we're seeing right now. And the Ravens have the hottest opening in the NFL.
Yeah, 100%. And based off of what Steve said, like you just said right there, I mean, this wasn't like a 1 week decision where it's based off of them losing to the Steelers. This had been going on for a while. And Steven mentioned the fourth quarter leads getting given up and underperforming based off their playoff seeding and where they are in the playoffs. Like, this had been brewing for a while. I would have probably done it after last year. AFC Championship, I just knew they weren't going to fire him after making the AFC Championship, although I think that they probably should have tried to work something out there to get Mike McDonald that head coaching job, but it just unfortunately didn't work out that way for him. And now they are searching for their next head coach. And Cordell, there was an interesting, I guess, report from Peter Schrager over at ESPN. He went on the Pat McAfee show and talked about some of the details. And we'll get to what Steve had to say about everything in the later part of the show, because I think that's all interesting. But he was talking about the Cliff Kingsbury situation in Washington. And obviously Cliff is one of the candidates that has been onboarded in this interview process for the Ravens here. And he was asked about, could Cliff get a head coaching job? What's the situation with Cliff Kingsbury? And Peter Schrager said, quote, "He wants to work. I can tell you, I think he'd be fine with me saying this. It'll be an honor for him to work with Lamar Jackson. That is something that is very exciting for him." Also mentioned the whole thing with Cliff in Washington, saying that they wanted to make a change. And Peter Schrager said he was more than fine to just kind of no longer be the offensive play caller in that building. But here's the interesting part, I think, Cordell, where Peter Schrager said, quote, he interviewed yesterday. This was a couple days ago. So he interviewed yesterday with the Ravens, and he interviewed both for the head coach job and the offensive coordinator job, which I think is really interesting. And I think Mike McDaniel is going to do the same with Baltimore as well. Peter went into a bunch of details on how they're doing stuff, where they're bringing these guys in, and it's DeCosta, Sashi Brown, and then he mentioned what we all found out from Steve yesterday, which is Bisciotti has input, but he doesn't know if he's in this round of interviews and all that whole stuff. But he said, quote, "They just want to hear you talk because they haven't had a fresh voice in there for 18 years, and they want to hear what your philosophies are, and they want to hear what you're going to maximize and do with Lamar." And he went into details about how, Lamar is one of the greatest offensive talents we've seen, and they want to maximize that window. So I think it's curious that some of these guys are interviewing for multiple positions, but honestly, I think that's a smart thing to do.
I think some of these guys probably aren't going to get, some of them may not get head coaching opportunities, or they may not get the job offers that they're looking for. So they may have to resort to going back to being a coordinator, whether we're talking about guys like Kingsbury or guys like Flores, who's also doing the same thing and taking defensive coordinator interviews around the league as well, along with his head coaching interviews. So they're going to just stockpile as much information as they can, especially while they have these coaches in these settings at that time. They're going to interview them for, both of those roles, even if it's, in my mind, even before this report, if they're interviewing them for a head coach, in their mind, they're still documenting the things that, if they do get a head coach, they have somebody in mind that they can kind of refer as an offensive coordinator that they like or something like that. Guys like Kingsbury and McDaniels, they are great offensive minds. They may not be great head coaches. I don't know. But they for sure know the offensive side of the ball, and they're defensive coordinators in that same boat. So not surprised to see the Ravens doing that.
Yeah, McDaniel's definitely my top choice for the Ravens at the offensive coordinator spot, assuming that they go with someone else different there. But I think the leadership quality is something a lot of people in the Ravens are looking for in this entire search. So for a Kingsbury, I'm definitely not in on him as the head coach, but as an offensive coordinator, and to hear this report from Peter to say, not just is this the head coaching interview, but you're right, Cordell, where it's like you can apply those same things and all right, hey, maybe this guy can fit in a different role with us because we liked what he had to say about, XYZ or whatever they were talking about in those interviews. And coming up, we'll talk a little bit about what the Ravens are looking for. We'll talk about what Stephen A. Smith had to say about Lamar Jackson and his input in the head coaching search, as well as what Steve Bisciotti had to say as well. So stay tuned, plenty coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Quo. New year, new systems. This is the time when a lot of us look at the messier parts of how we run our business and think there has to be a better way. And there is. Streamlining your communications is one of the quickest upgrades you can make. That's why today's episode is brought to you by Quo, spelled Quo, the smarter way to run your business communications. Because when your team is reachable, organized, and communicating in one place, you're not just working cleaner, you're creating more opportunities to connect with customers. I love how simple Quo makes everything. Your whole team can call and text from one shared business number, so nothing gets missed. Everyone sees the full conversation thread, which makes replies faster and more personal. There's no surprise, Quo is the #1 rated business phone system on G2, trusted by more than 90,000 businesses, from solo operators to growing teams. Make this the year where no opportunity, no customer slips away. Try Quo for free, plus get 20% off your first 6 months when you go to quo.com/LockedOnNFL. That's QUO.com/LockedOnNFL. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. And the show is brought to you by Ultimate QB Football Legend. Hey guys, your draft pick positions are set and so many teams are looking for their franchise QB. Ever wish to become a pro QB getting drafted first overall by the Ravens? Well, now you can. There's a mobile game just for you called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a #1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness, to help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the #1 QB career mode game on the mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with a full career control. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a QB career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, and every choice shapes your journey. Ultimate QB is totally free to play, has no ads, and works 100% offline. Perfect for when you want to sneak in a quick game or two on the go. Just head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in your app store. And we've got something special just for you guys. Use the promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, in the game store to get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB Football Legend, QB1, it's your legacy. Back here, Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher and Cordell Woodland still here with you, talking Ravens football 5 days a week, plus more daily Ravens coverage here on Locked On Ravens. And you also have bonus episodes on the weekend. We got instant reactions to big news. We had an instant reaction to that Steve Bisciotti press conference yesterday. And I mean, Cordell, Steve Bisciotti, he hasn't talked to the media in that setting in a while. And I know that you were in the building. Well, Steve was speaking truth and being honest and open and accountable. I mean, how was that press conference for you, hearing what Steve had to say about this team and the direction and everything that went down?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of fans say that presser was a breath of fresh air, and that's exactly what it felt like being there. So many times you go out there and you're getting coach speak, you're getting the runaround, you're getting word salad. Yeah, in that press conference, Steve was just, even if everything he said wasn't completely honest, like I'm not expecting him to come out there and spill his guts and tell all the dark secrets. But he seemed engaging, he seemed open, he seemed like he wanted to talk, and you didn't get the sense that he was BSing you. You just didn't feel that way. Now, if he was a couple of times, credit to him. He's got a great poker face, but I just thought he did a good job of making people feel like they were worth him answering the questions that everybody had. And he knew the questions that we had. And even like when you heard him start to talk about some of the issues of the fourth quarter collapses, that's something John has brushed off. That's something John has made seem like wasn't a thing. And for Steve to go into that, for Steve to acknowledge that, to acknowledge the playoff collapses, it was just refreshing, I think, to hear from the man up top actually have some sort of feel for what's actually happening in the real world and not trying to force these purple glasses on people. I get it. He's got to protect the organization, and they don't want everything out, and certain things don't need to be out in the public. But every now and then, it is good, I think, for the general public. They like to feel like you respect them enough to tell them the truth in certain instances, to tell them they're not tripping when they're watching this offensive line not be able to block anybody. And then here you got John every week acting like they're doing fine, and Steve gets up there and say the offensive line didn't improve at all this year, and that's on coaching. Like, that's what people want to hear. It's not about the bashing. It's just about the honesty of it all, the realization of you're not as great as you think you are. And that was something that Steve talked about too. But I'll tell you one thing, real power was in the building that day. You hear some of them other dudes talking there, it's not as sure. Steve talks with absolute certainty. Whatever he is telling you, whatever he says he wants to do, he can do it. And, within the Ravens organization, that was, for somebody that hadn't talked to Steve before, that was really cool to see.
I think that's what everybody wanted. It was the accountability. And I think it's okay to say, like, hey, look, we know we can be better, but it wasn't good this year. And the acknowledgement of that, of saying, oh, no, we have all this and we have all that, and this is going to be great and this is going to be fine. People don't want to hear that right now. People want to hear, like, yes, we understand as an organization that was not good enough for what our standards are and our expectations are. And we are going to take that on the chin. And I think that's what Steve Bisciotti was going up there and saying, leaving no stone unturned. And, when he dropped that "our dear friend" line, I think everybody was like, okay. And then, the for 1 week, or in response to, I think it was Jerry's question. I mean, yeah. You could tell, like, Steve was not holding back on anything. He was being about as real as you can get, like you said, without, spilling all the dark secrets.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was brutal honesty. It's like you said, he asked if they win in Pittsburgh, is John fired? Is he still here? He's like, for a week. That tells me he doesn't think that they were going very far, even if they did make it to the playoffs. And B, like he said at the beginning part of the presser, he had talked to Eric about it for the first time 3 to 4 weeks ago. This was something that was brewing. It wasn't a brash decision of, we just lost to the division rivals in heartbreaking fashion on prime time. Like, I got to get John out of here. It seems like something that he struggled to come to terms with, Steve, that is, probably more than John, honestly, from what Steve said. And, he went with his instinct, but it's not an easy thing to do. But credit to him for, allowing us to get a peek into his mind, into what his thoughts were and what went into him making that decision.
Yeah, it was very real. And like you had mentioned, I mean, from Steve, and even just like, I called it a Todd Monken interview on steroids, because Todd was very open and accountable during his time, and was very willing to say, it starts with me, and, I'm responsible for this. And I thought the Steve just like took that up 10 notches and was like, yeah, I'm about to tell you everything that I feel without holding back. But one thing that Steve did mention was Lamar's involvement in this whole thing and the whole process, and essentially said, like, yeah, Lamar's invited to be a part of this process, but it's going to be like long days, and we're going to take him through this entire thing. And Steve said that he thinks Lamar's going to take him up on it. So we will see how that whole process works. But Stephen A. Smith talked a little bit on ESPN about how involved Lamar should be. And Stephen A. said, quote, he should be incredibly involved. It's going to determine the success of the franchise moving forward. Stephen A. also talked about what the Ravens should be looking for in a head coach. And he said, quote, you need somebody who's not going to just be favorable to you, but it's somebody that's going to prioritize the overall picture. In the end, what it comes down to, leadership. When you're the face of the franchise, you should always be consulted, because you're the one everyone's going to point the finger at if things go awry. And Stephen A. went into his own situation, and he was like, I'll be damned if you're going to make a decision and never say anything to me and never consult me, but then come to me and point the finger when stuff goes crazy. So I think it's interesting, because I think Lamar should be very involved, but Steve said, like, very much, and I think it's the correct answer, when he was asked about how much say Lamar will have. He said, quote, a lot of say, but he has no power. I have the power. They have opinions, and I want them all. I care about my players very much, but I can't give them power. Honestly, Cordell, he should just mic drop right there and walked off the stage. I mean, but that's exactly the correct thing. Is like, you should value your players' opinions. You should have them involved. But those are not the guys that are making the decisions. As the owner, Steve, even Eric and Sashi and Ozzy, they're going to have a ton of input, and they're going to be very involved in this process, more so than they were 18 years ago, according to Steve. And this going to be a different process than it was 18 years ago. And they're going to come to him with their recommendations and say, this is the guy. And Steve is going to either sign off on it and say, you know what, yes, or maybe let's not do that. But Steve is the one that has the final say. And I'm very pleased that, from what it sounds like, they are going to involve Lamar in this process.
Yeah, as much as he wants to be involved. And I agree. He should be. I do think some of what Steve said has kind of gained legs and taken on a life of its own. I've seen how certain like social media pages are framing the quote and what they're putting up there. I don't think Steve said that to like flex on Lamar. I don't think he's like flexing on Lamar like, oh, you've got no power and I've got it all. Like, that goes without saying. I don't think that's what Steve was doing. I just think that's who he is. He was just being himself, talking how he talks. Hopefully that's how Lamar took it. But I see that the way that quote is being pushed, it seems like it's confrontational. And I don't think that that's how Steve meant it. But I do agree that Lamar should be heavily involved in this. Hopefully that he does take Steve up on his offer. This is what franchise players do. This is what franchise coaches do. Franchise quarterbacks do. You know, they're a part of this type of process. And not a lot of franchise quarterbacks, especially ones that have played for coaches like a John Harbaugh, coaches that have had that type of longevity, get to go through a process like this. It's pivotal, I think, for Lamar to do this because he's entering another act of his career. And this coach will have a heavy impact on what that act looks like for him. So he needs to be able to learn everything about these guys, have his voice heard, because the last thing you want is for them to make a choice and Lamar doesn't like him or he doesn't like certain things. And now it is on him because he didn't take advantage of the opportunity that was there. So hopefully he does jump on that plane.
And that it's something we've heard Eric DeCosta talk about. Even John Harbaugh talked about it. And Todd Monken, when he came in, I mean, Greg Roman did not let Lamar do a lot in that offense. Todd Monken was very clear about, we're giving Lamar the keys here. John Harbaugh was on that same page. Eric DeCosta said Lamar is a big part of what they do at every level. And so he's a part of these decision-making processes. But again, like, I agree with you. It wasn't Steve saying, I'm the one that's going to do this and you're not going to. No, it was him saying, like, I care about all my guys. But at the end of the day, I am the owner. And that's a completely reasonable thing to say. And like, say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take everybody's opinion into account. But at the end of the day, he's the one that's going to be, signing off on that dotted line with the final decision. And I think that it is the correct thing to say. So we're going to talk a lot more about where the Ravens can go with their head coaching search and more about what Steve had to say, as well as just what's next for this team, because according to Steve Bisciotti, they want Lamar to be their quarterback, but there are avenues that they can make things easier on them before free agency with Lamar's contract. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Home Chef. As the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease, and it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule. 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, or quick lunches. Over 30 weekly options, including family-sized meals and different dietary choices. And recipes are simple but feel elevated, even restaurant quality, with dishes co-created by chefs like Gordon Ramsay. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. And the show is brought to you by Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper, it wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates to truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posted on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. If I needed to hire someone for this show, I'd go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what I need, real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Instead of struggling to get your job posted, Indeed sponsored jobs help your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. We are back, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher, Cordell Woodland, still talking with you here on the show. 5 days a week of Ravens coverage and content here. Plus, we have a lot of other bonus content, even add-on content like the Everydayer Club. So if you want to find out more about that and all the tiers that are offered, be sure to check out the link in the description below. Or you can go to the Locked On website on the Locked On Ravens page and find out more there. Cordell, I thought what Steve said about the head coaching search in general was very interesting and made it very clear that, like, look, this is not going to be the same search it was 18 years ago. And he is kind of shifted in his values, I guess, of what they want or what he's looking at personally. He said, quote, unlike 18 years ago, I'm very intrigued by coaches that were the hottest OCs and DCs 5, 6, 7 years ago in their cycles, got jobs and got the teams that were non-competitive and didn't have a QB, and they grind for 3 to 4 years and they're caught up in the cycle. And I think before that quote, a lot of people thought that they might just go with the hot young candidate, maybe the Clint Kubiak in Seattle on the offensive side or the Jesse Minter on the defensive side. And those guys are still involved in the process, but I think a lot of people heard that quote and were like, is that Robert Saleh? Is that Brian Flores? Is that another one of these guys like Matt Nagy's interview for this job? Is that him? But maybe based off Peter's report, they're interviewing every one of those guys for multiple different positions. How do you feel like the Ravens would do with a younger coach? I know there'd be questions about the leadership and commanding a room and whatnot, but I think you can build a strong staff around that guy with the bright young minds that they are. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm not against it. To be honest with you, I've seen a lot of people talk about going younger or the difference between going younger and older. I don't really think age matters, to be honest with you. I don't think age matters in this situation. It's not. The Sean McVays aren't just hanging from a tree. The Kyle Shanahan's, like, being young does not guarantee that you're going to be a great coach. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to be able to stick. Doesn't mean you don't know football, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee you success. Just like being an older coach doesn't mean that you can't keep up with this new era of the NFL. Doesn't mean that you're out of touch with the players. There are older coaches around the league that do connect with their players. So I don't really think the age matters to me personally. I'm all about going to get the best coach. Who knows what they're doing? Who knows how to maximize this talent that you have on the team? I'm looking for, it's like you get out of this long-term relationship and now you're looking for the qualities that you didn't get out of your last relationship. So what were some of those qualities? Well, I would make the argument that John did not maximize the talent that was on the roster. He did not get the most out of the guys that were there. So who is able to do that? Whether it is a guy that's a coordinator that maybe had a top 10 offense, but didn't really have a lot of elite talent at the skill positions. Maybe it's that defensive coordinator that was able to still generate pressure without having a top 5 edge rusher in the NFL like that. Those are the types of guys that I'm looking at. Who has the track record of being able to squeeze as much juice as they can out of that orange? I'm looking for guys that when I watch them, they aren't out there, holding the team back in the sense of clock management issues for John. And this is something that may be tough to figure out with coordinators because they don't have that type of power. But I just want to see the in-between. Just like how they hit a home run with McDonald, who was so great at, I think, being able to have a great feel of the game and understanding how to adjust on the fly. That's one of those unique things that you can find out about a coach that makes him tick. That's something that I would figure out. What's a coach out there that can help us win on the margins? I just don't. I think if the Ravens came in there as an 88 overall team, John Harbaugh didn't add the +2 to get them to a 90. What coach gives them that +2 instead of that -1 or that 0? Just that no, nothing that's a plus or minus. That's what I'm looking for. Which coach can come in and help the talent that we already have? Who can take them to the next level? Who can get the most out of them? That's what I would be looking for.
I thought that it was also interesting about Steve's comments about Lamar Jackson in general. First of all, he kind of spoke up for Lamar in a way and put it out there that Lamar told him that everybody's saying he has a problem with Monken, and he doesn't really have a problem with Monken. Then he hears he has a problem with Harbaugh. He doesn't really have a problem with Harbaugh. And talked about how, he and Lamar talked and said, Lamar said, quote, "We got to make changes probably, but that's more for you and E," meaning Eric DeCosta. So again, like taking into account all the player opinions, but he did mention that that wasn't really a big factor in his decision. This was more on Bisciotti and being set in what he thought was the right call. But in terms of moving money around for Lamar Jackson, we all remember, Cordell, how the 2023 offseason went. Lamar on that big franchise tag cap hit, and they really couldn't do anything in that free agency period because that number was taking up a lot of their space, and they essentially missed out on all the free agency. And so Steve made it very clear that he wants Lamar to be his quarterback, but he said, quote, "If he doesn't want to do an extension, we throw those $74 million into void years, and Lamar's coming back at the same cap number he was last year. You can play with that money. That's not what we want. We want another window." And again, just to me, I think that is very important because Eric DeCosta still talked about how his vision is building the team through the draft, but said they're going to participate in free agency. They will trade for players. But I think if you're Eric DeCosta, Cordell, the shield of John Harbaugh is gone, much like the shield of Greg Roman left for John Harbaugh, where now all the attention, because Steve talked about the patience that he's going to have for this guy. And again, it kind of seems like there's going to be that patience, which is the correct decision. So at this point, if I'm Eric DeCosta, I'm calling up Las Vegas about Max Crosby. I'm calling up all these teams about their star players and being like, all right, this is the year to make the all-in move. And at this point, what the first step kind of has to be is making sure you got Lamar's contract done before the start of free agency.
Yeah, I mean, that's at the top of their list. They have to get that cap number down. And, from what Steve said, when they spoke to Lamar understood that. And Lamar wants them to be able to go out there and make this team better. He's going to get his money. I don't think that this is going to be as crazy of a negotiation as it was the first time around. These types of deals aren't easy. We're talking about a 1%er in this league in Lamar Jackson at the premium of premium positions in all of sports, I would say right now. There isn't a more polarizing position than the quarterback position. So, and he doesn't have an agent. So, I mean, it's not going to be an easy deal to get done, but I do think the framework of the deal is kind of already there, as Steve alluded to, saying that he feels like Lamar would be open to the same type of contract that he got last time, where he gets the no franchise tag, where he gets the no trade clause. And that's why I found it funny. All these people were talking about Lamar getting traded. Like, he has a no trade clause. So, and as far as I've always been told, Lamar does not want to leave Baltimore. So where's he really going? What are we really talking about? But that said, I tend to feel like they will get something done. I think Lamar wants to get back to the winning ways. He doesn't like missing the postseason. I think they all want to get that bad juju out of the building that was there this year, where it just felt like everything that could go wrong went wrong. And it starts in the offseason. So hopefully they are able to do something with that cap number. I do think Eric needs to, and look, Eric is an aggressive GM, but he is, he has his tendencies. He has his playbook that he likes to stick to. Every now and then he'll throw a curveball. But yeah, I am curious to see what he'd be willing to give up for another premium position, which is the edge rusher, a premium player at that position, because it's going to cost premium draft capital. They're picking at 14 this year. I would like to see how willing Eric really is to let go of some of these premium picks.
Yeah, and there's a time and a place for comp picks, but if it hinders you from going out there and throwing a 4-year, $60 million deal at the second best guard on the market when you need O-line help, that's not the way you should be operating. And I think Eric DeCosta is a good GM, and I think that he will learn from what happened this year, and maybe just because his job depends on it. I mean, we'll see what happens, but huge offseason ahead for the Ravens. There's no doubt about it. Starts with the head coaching search, but there are many months that this team has to improve and get back on the right track. Cordell, I appreciate you. Thanks so much for hopping on. Before I get you out of here, tell people where they can find you and what you're working on.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you having me. As always, you can follow me at Cordell Woodland across all social medias. And you can catch my show, The Fresh Take, Thursday evenings on the Odyssey app, 105.7 The Fan, and even on YouTube. You can subscribe to the 105.7 The Fan YouTube channel, and you can watch us when we're on air live as well.
Links in the description down below. Be sure to go support Cordell and all the work that he does. I appreciate you. Thanks so much for hopping on. And thank you to everybody who watched and listened today to Locked On Ravens. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to have more Ravens content and coverage for you, as we always do. So be sure to stay tuned. Hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along and subscribe in audio form. And I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.